Do you feel like you're always your own worst enemy? You get tired of feeling like you're always in your own way. In this episode, you'll discover how self-sabotage can hinder your recovery journey. Join us as we explore common self-sabotaging behaviors in addiction recovery, featuring personal stories and, of course, strategies to help you break free and reclaim control.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Steve and Julie. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full, there's no space left for alcohol.
If you haven't rated and reviewed our podcast yet, please take a minute to do that. It's a really important part of getting these conversations into the hands of the people that need them the most. Whether you listen on Apple, Spotify, or a different app, please consider leaving a rating. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast. It's nice to see some new faces. It's nice to have Leah back for a second time. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So we will start with our intros. I'm going to let Leah go first because she's done this before, so she knows what's up and all of that good stuff.
Right on. Hello, everybody. I'm Leah. I currently live in Corona Del Mar, California. I've been alcohol-free since New Year's, so that's January 1st of this year, and independent of cannabis since July 4th.
The independence of independence.
Yes, Independence Day. That's why I say it. And so I am months along in the journey, but I've tried for sobriety in the past, and with community, it's now working more. So that's me. Currently, I'm retired. I was an elementary music teacher for my career. So I'm now in the healing world.
I love it. Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. It's nice to have you again. And the next up, we're going to go with Sean.
Hello. My name is Sean. I'm an alcoholic. I have been sober since December 3rd, 2021. I'm 45 years old now. I keep saying 46, but that's not till October. So 45.11, I suppose. I'm from Colorado, currently living in Rifle, Colorado, after an extended stretch of about 22 years in Grand Junction. Super happy and thrilled to be out of there, closer back to the mountains where I grew up. So I currently both live in and work for Oxford House Inc. This is my 5th Oxford House. We opened out here in Rifle last October. I've been living in an Oxford House, well, since about 2 weeks after I got sober, so December of 2021. And currently I get the opportunity to go into new areas and educate people on who Oxford House is, what we do, network with resource providers, network with the public, open new houses, educate and support existing houses, wear a lot of different hats, but it's the best job I've ever had. I'm very blessed to be here. So shameless plug for Oxford House. If you're looking for a room, www.oxfordvacancies.com is our national vacancies website and where you can apply.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't think we've actually talked about Oxford House at all on here.
Right.
So I'm glad that we're bringing some awareness to it. Really cool resource for people, for sure. So I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. I actually met Sean when I was about 17, when I first moved out of my parents' house, and I was living in this little apartment complex, and I was in my party phase and Sean was in his party phase. And so we hung out a lot there for a few years when I was super young. There's a lot of different drugs and alcohol and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Those memories for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But we lost touch after, I don't know, when I was about 20, I kind of lost touch with my whole circle. And so just a few weeks ago, Steve and I had the pleasure of going to Glenwood Springs for a peer recovery conference, and ran into Sean there, and he sat down at our table, and I was like, oh my God, Steve, I think I know him.
It was hilarious. She was like tapping me. She's like, I think I know that guy. Wait a minute. I think I went to raves with that guy.
Right. No, it was a shock. because they were like, yeah, Angie from Pure 180 was like, yeah, you know, Through the Glass. I'm like, I think I do. Yeah, I think I've heard it. And like, yeah, so this is Steve and Julie. I'm like, oh, cool. Hi, nice to meet you. And Julie's like, I think we know each other. And I, for a second time, I'm like, what? Julie? And I get up and it's like biggest hug. I'm like, I can't believe this was in recovery. Oh my God, this is so cool. So yeah.
Yeah. So
I think I was literally screeching like a girl.
I think you were. Yeah.
I was there and I agree.
There was definitely screeching. No, it was super cool. So anyway, I am super excited to have you here now. I love that we've reconnected after 20 years and some years of recovery, and now we get to hang out and talk about it. So that's really good to have you. And
Thank you for inviting me to the space. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And then last but not least, we have Rick.
Hey, it's good to see you. Yeah, I am Rick, and I'm 68 years old. I did not get sober until 63. I have been sober now for a little over 5 years. July 27th, 2019 was my date. So just had my 5-year birthday. So
Thanks.
Yeah, it's just been quite a journey. I'm a college professor. I teach at a small college for men in Western or Central Indiana called Wabash College. And I'm an historian. So, but I used to be a chef. And so every recovery group I'm in, which is several, the word chef gets in my name somehow. So, you know, I'm on Iron Sober for Chef 56. I'm in the luckiest club for Chef Prof Rick. Chef this, chef that. So I did work as a chef, professional chef for over a decade. And then I went back to school, became a professor. And I'm interested in the history of food. Been trying to write a book about that and hopefully finishing that up before too long. And I'm pivoting to do some research on the history of recovery and in a global sense. So I really would like to, there's a lot of stuff out there. There's plenty of quit lib and all kinds of stuff out there. I've got quite a library of it, but there's not much that does like a comparative global focus through time. And that's when I'm a world historian at heart. And so that's my next big project. So I started that. And at the college, I'm 100% out. And I've actually given a couple speeches at the college. And I also work with recovery at the college where I work with the health services, but also students actually come to see me if they feel like that they're binging or having issues with drinking or other substances. You may know that Gen Z has been pivoting towards marijuana more than alcohol in a lot of ways. So I've been dealing with guys that are having issues with that, porn, all kinds of different addictions. There's a lot of parallel stuff going on there. So I love my job. That's why I'm not retired at 68. I'm actually on sabbatical for the semester, so I'm not in classes right now. But I like dealing with students about these issues. So, and I'm motivated. I'll be doing that in my retirement. And I do also do volunteer and also some paid work for the Luckiest Club and online sobriety support community. So that keeps me pretty busy.
Awesome.
That is awesome.
That is so much cool stuff that you do. Thank you so much for sharing all of that and for being here. I'll tell a quick story about Chef 2. I'm pretty sure you were at the very, very first online Zoom meeting that I ever went to. I think I was about 2 hours sober when I went to that meeting, and Chef was also very involved in starting those meetings, which
we started those up right after in the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, I don't think I would be sober today if it wasn't for those meetings. So you definitely played a huge part in my recovery. So just really cool. And Steve's too, because that's where Steve and I met. Like this podcast wouldn't exist if it weren't for what you guys did there. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so just really such a neat group. I can actually say I've hugged every person.
I know. I was just about to say that
room, and that is really cool.
That. I'm recognizing that we've actually met each one of these people in person, one time or another. Yeah. And I've hugged.
It doesn't happen very often. No, say that. So that's really special.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. We're breaking all kinds of records here, people.
Yeah, we are. This is great. Cool. Okay. Well, we're gonna talk about our topic. This topic came up in our last recording, and we thought we would make an episode out of it. Self-sabotage. So I can't count how many times I've heard people in recovery say, I just had to get out of my own way. And that is absolutely true. we tend to be our own biggest obstacles. So, what were some of the ways that you got in your own way that stopped you from getting sober or staying sober? And how did you stop? And are there ways that you still tend to self-sabotage that you are working on?
Mm.
The floor is yours. There are no rules here, so feel free to dive in and we'll take it from there.
Well, for myself, I would have to say the biggest way I self-sabotaged, and I think it's kind of counterintuitive a little bit, maybe being on this side of it, is like, well, I didn't want to recognize that I had substance use disorder or an alcoholic, as they call it in my program, that was just part of who I was, and it was going to be that way for the rest of my life. I always constantly wanted to maintain the sense that I had control, that I could stop when I wanted to stop, that I didn't need to do all of the recovery stuff, especially exacerbated for me, I suppose, because I grew up in recovery in a lot of ways. My father was an addict, and I remember after his marriage with my mother fell apart when I was around 12, we reconnected a couple years later in Grand Junction, and he took me to an AA meeting, and it was the first time I'd been to an AA meeting, but he just wanted to show me what he was doing. I didn't actually use until I was almost 19. So his side of raising me was very much based in both biblical and program virtues, right? And so in my adulthood, I thought to myself, well, I understand recovery. I understand the spiritual principles. I'm a pretty spiritual guy. I'm a nice guy. I don't really need to do all of that stuff. Probably the biggest way I self-sabotaged was refusing to buy into the fact that despite that I knew about recovery, I didn't actually live it. And so making that transition was fundamental to this period of sobriety actually sticking in my life.
That is huge. Just to be raised with all of it, to know it and see it. I didn't experience that, but I would imagine that almost makes you feel like you're immune to it, like you know better or something, right? So then to have to be like, no, I actually don't know better, that would be tough. That's humbling, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it absolutely was. I don't know about anybody else. I got to be really careful that I just speak for myself, but I, for one, certainly did not want to admit that I was powerless over anything. Like being powerless over other people, I could get behind. People are going to do what they want, right? I get that. And powerless over, society and government and all these other things like nature. Yeah, obviously I'm powerless, but powerless over myself? Really? I literally can't control this aspect of myself. Incredibly humbling. And yet, once I came to peace with that piece of myself, or part of myself, it was probably the most liberating thing that ever happened. And it's so crazy because it's I understood these things, like I mentioned before, intellectually, conceptually, I understood them. But there's a vast difference in my experience between understanding something conceptually and understanding something experientially. And when I actually engaged the recovery process sincerely for the first time in my life from a place of complete surrender, which I guess segues into how did I change self-sabotaging, it was frankly coming to a place of such desperation that I was sincerely ready to put it all down. I surrender. I give up. I'll actually do what you people are telling me to do. And I did, pretty diligently. It's interesting. They say 90 meetings in 90 days. I think I stopped counting at about 250 because I was on 3 or 4 a day. You couldn't keep me out of the rooms, for the first 90 days or so. And that's just one aspect of it. It's the meetings, I had a sponsor and did the work and actual 4-step and all that stuff. I actually did all of that stuff, but none of that would have been possible if I didn't get out of my own way by just being honest with myself about who I was. And I was going to be this way, and that's okay. It's okay that I'm this way. Now what am I going to do about it? Hopefully that helps get the conversation going.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate here. Tell you my self-sabotage story. It starts when I was very little. I I grew up with a very narcissistic mother and a dad who's shut down emotionally, and I'm the youngest in my family, and I just always wanted to fit in and belong. So from a really young age, I wasn't allowed to have big feelings, big emotions and things. And so from a young age, I learned to abandon my own self and please others and step into a role of just whatever people wanted from me to fit in and be liked in the situation. And so putting too much pressure on myself to be perfect and all of these things. And when I discovered substances, that was like just another way of a layer of how I could relieve some of that pressure, but it also was more self-sabotaging. It was even more that I would drink to numb myself from the feelings of not being good enough. I would smoke pot to numb out and forget about how I felt about myself, and I never felt good enough. So for many, many years, I just worked my ass off and hid behind this whole armor of I've got this, I can handle life, and I didn't want anybody to see my pain. I didn't want anybody to see what I was going through. And I just put the pressure on myself. And so I dug in. My first downfall was in eating disorders. So I've put a lot of pressure on myself for all kinds of things, but my self-sabotage with eating disorders, over exercising, drugs, alcohol, I tried to heal from that on my own. So I put pressure on myself, and that's where self-sabotage came in the recovery world. A few years ago, I tried to get sober on my own, just white knuckling it. And I failed miserably because I was my own worst enemy, and my self-sabotage, I was in my own way. And on my own self-sabotage, I was just wreaking havoc and drinking to feel better, smoking pot to be numb and feel better about it all. And finally, when I said enough was enough, because I was so depressed, I didn't want to be in society anymore. I was losing my relationship with my husband because I was just so checked out and so numb, and I couldn't vocalize anything. And I jumped into the healing world, and I found communities to help support. So Through the Glass has been huge. Coaching with Julie here, we talk about self-sabotage. We've been talking about that for months now. And so, yeah, that's been very, very helpful to find people. So when I'm feeling those moments of I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I want to either drink or use or do something to hurt myself, I'll reach out to people now. I have a community, and Julie's one of those people who, yeah, I can reach out to. In the healing world, I'm in a childhood trauma recovery group, and that's been huge as well. I've learned about how I self-sabotage, how it was a coping skill for me growing up, and how I don't need to look outside of myself for all those things anymore to be perfect. And I'm lovable. Love and peace and acceptance is all within me. And so it's been a huge turnaround for me in the past 8 months of recovery. I started with alcohol, added in marijuana, and I'm liberated. I feel self-worth again. And of course I still have self-sabotage moments, but in recovery, I'm able to find myself again. And that's going to take me a while because I was very lost for 47 years. So
that's great. It's kind of funny. I sort of feel like there's two, there's like two windows. Like one is like before I went sober, self-sabotage myself then, and then second is, the process of doing it and how that, there's issues coming up when you're doing that. But it's been a while, it's been 5 years, so it's probably a lot of it's been forgotten in some sense. But I remember when I was, I didn't have a lot of super traumatic stuff or whatever, right, in my background. My father died when I was young. I don't probably never dealt with that, but mostly I just, I would just like working and not getting everything done and feeling depressed and going home and drinking every single night. And so the way I self-sabotaged myself then was like, as an academic, I kept Excel charts and, I want to, how much did I eat or weigh every day? Did I do my yoga? Did I do some walking? And like 8 things. Of course, number 9 was alcohol. And the whole freaking reason why I'm doing this is number 9.
It's number 9.
Yeah. Yeah, but, and of course, number 9 was always, it's like I told my doctor when I went to him and I was going to go sober, I said, well, I wasn't lying to you when I said 2 a day. I didn't mean glasses, I meant bottles. Right. But, and so, that was self-sabotage on a daily freaking basis, basically. Right. And with this myth that, somehow others can, and then, I had my turning point in my bottom, whatever you want to call it, where I had my last blackout and I woke up at 3 a.m. on the 27th of July, 2019, and turned to my wife and said, "That's it, 3 o'clock in the morning. That's it, no more." And I haven't had one since. And the process after that, so we've been through it. It's not fun, right? So, I mean, it's really difficult, especially in the beginning. And so people often, I've actually met thousands of people in sobriety because of the groups I've talked to you about. I mean, I can't, it's just amazing how many people I've met. And that I don't know, everybody's story is different, right? I mean, it's really important for us to focus on that. But if I had to point to one thing, it's connection. Connection. I used to say connection beats addiction, but some people like the word addiction. So I'm like, connection beats the beast or whatever, right? Whatever you want to do. Yeah. But, that's what programs are about, right? And I've been in a lot of them, believe me. That's what being on I Am Sober is about. Either you're posting or else you found the Zooms or whatever, right? That's what this is about, right? It's connection. And one of the things that I think I coined in the group that I'm in right now is that it's like the Harry Potter books, right? There's wizards and there's muggles. And so we're wizards, okay? Yeah. And you should be nice to muggles, okay? Damn it. Be nice to muggles, right? I'm married to one. They don't get it, right? And you can't expect them to get it, right? You can't, right? It's wrong to try to get them to get it. That's why we got to connect with each other. That's what connection is about, whether it's through a program or like this or apps or whatever, right? So I think if I had to point to one thing, I go some kind of connection, right? So, so the times when that evil little voice, Mr. Cunning, Baffling, and Powerful comes through, and the wine bitch or whatever is on my shoulder, like I have to tell somebody, right? That's what I do, and so. One time, he was coming after me about a year ago, and I actually reached out to somebody that was 4 days sober, right? So, what the hell, right? Because they get it, right? But to me, that's in a constant solution. Every day is day one, WON, day one. And I think that sharing and being. I was actually in Starbucks in town about 2 years ago, and I had on a shirt that I gotten when I went to visit Bill W.'s house. I do have a 12-step background also. And I went to Bill W.'s house, Dr. Bob's house, actually in Akron. And I bought a shirt that, said Cunning, Baffling, and Powerful. And so I was in Starbucks, and this dude, I don't even know, comes running up. He goes like, 6 years. Yeah. And so everybody else is looking at this shirt. They got no idea what the hell it means, right? But there's this natural connection, Yeah. So to me, that's the connection is the most important thing. So, And I will say also, last thing I'll say is that when Sean mentioned 90-90, so I started out, well, I did tell my doctor a couple of days in, I got to do it. And he goes like, what are you going to do? You going to go to AA? I'm like, man. There's nothing but a bunch of drunks there. He looks at me. What about you just tell me about how much you were drinking? I went there, and actually, I love the guy. I live in rural Indiana, and they're kind of a different world from me. A lot of them are, but they're always focused on everybody getting sober, which is great. I just loved it. And I would go. I'm just the same as Sean, man. I just like going. I was like became addicted to going to meetings. I went to every damn meeting I could, and this guy comes up to me about a month in. He goes, "Are you doing a 90-90?" I'm like, "What the hell is that?" I was doing a 90-90 without knowing I was doing a 90-90, right? And I did end up doing 90-90, just because that seemed like the natural thing to do. So that points to connection too. So,
it's interesting that you bring that up, because for me, I'm hearing that and I'm thinking that's one of the biggest barriers that I had. And I wonder, but I also surmise, of course, that a lot of people in early recovery have that. For me, one of the reasons I struggled so much staying sober during my other failed attempts was the connection, because in order to actually connect to people, I had to get vulnerable, and I had evidence after evidence after evidence after evidence of that never working out for me.
Yeah.
And then I would go into these rooms and I'd go around these people, and I'd have this idea that like, oh, okay, these are where the spiritual people are at. These are where the people are going to be where I can be vulnerable. And much to my dismay, no, it's a bunch of human beings still, and there were many times where I was like, I'm not going to bother genuinely connecting with people because I don't want to get vulnerable. And then
the self-sabotage, right?
Exactly my point. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly my point.
I'm glad you brought the word vulnerability up, because I think that's a really key word for me. It was my word of the year last year, actually. And in particular, to be honest with you, working with men. So the group the luckiest goes like it's only 90% female, but the guys that are in there, they bond in kind of really cool ways, and they allow themselves to be vulnerable. They talk about going to therapy and all kinds of things that I don't have in other groups of men that I've been in. Right. So vulnerability, it's such a huge part of our process, I think. And I haven't been raised a man. I think I'm just going to say, being raised a man, sometimes it's harder to see that than I
think
I'll overplay that, but yeah.
No, I mean, you can overplay it, and you can I think women experience it just in a different way.
Yeah,
for sure.
True.
But I mean, you're right. I think part of it's the stereotype, right? Men just can't be vulnerable. Vulnerability equals weakness.
Got to get over that.
and then once you flip your head around, and that's part of self-sabotage. Once you flip your head around and you're like, whoa, this is actually a strength. Sean, you mentioned it, after time and time and time again of essentially putting my vulnerability in the wrong place. Right? You rack up this pile of evidence that says I can't be vulnerable because it hurts.
Yeah.
And then you show up in a space. This is exactly what you're talking about, of people that this is what they do, or this is what they're trying to do, or they're trying to learn. It's a different environment. It's a group of people that are trying to actually figure it out, or they've done more work, so you get to learn from them, or whatever that is. And it's this weird, very freeing breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, any kind of group that you show up to, still 3.5 years sober today, like I can go into a group of people that are in recovery, or people that are in a mode of growth. There's still a breath of fresh air. Those are the people I learn from, and like the conversations that come from it are absolutely entertaining and amazing. And I never let myself have those,
right?
Because I was too scared,
right?
And I'm talking about, listening to you guys about self-sabotage, and before quitting, procrastination came, and I'm going to focus on like the words that I used to keep myself stuck. And so I would procrastinate, and then it would be crunch time, and then I would tell myself I worked really good under pressure.
Feel that. Yep.
Right?
I still do it.
because I would piss away all of the time, and then I would be like, oh crap, and then get it done, and then pat myself on the back for being really good at working under pressure. So I would call myself internally, because I never said this out loud, but I'm a high functioning drinker. Like I can amazingly show up to work slammed, and still get all of my stuff done, and nobody will catch me.
Right. They didn't know. Right.
So all of that stuff made me feel good about myself and about the things that I was doing wrong, allowed me to just justify it. Right. That won't happen to me.
Right. Getting away with it is kind of a form of self-sabotage, what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then saying, like, there was people who I would see get pulled over drinking. That won't happen to me. There's how many things I've said that wouldn't happen to me. You know, I'm not going to get sick from drinking. That's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to have the liver problems or anything like that.
I'll never drink in the morning.
Yeah, that's not.
I'll never be one of those people that has to go to meetings. That was one of mine.
Right. Right. I don't have a drinking problem when I'm waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, heaving, and then itching for the drink, finally getting one at 6 o'clock as I pull out of my driveway. That the versions of that won't happen to me started out really small, and then I just kept moving the line because I didn't want to have to deal with my problem.
Well, and then always for me too, like on that same line was like, after it got worse, oh, I will never do that again. There's no way it could get any worse than what I just did. And the next time was worse. And looking back, it's insane. Like 12 levels of it getting worse. And every single time, like, well, I'll never do, like, there's no way I'm going to lose control again because that happened. Now I'm definitely going to have control. So that inspires me to think about,
Yeah, so the version of self-sabotage that comes to my mind, at least right now, is all of the stuff I said to myself to avoid actually dealing with my problem.
Oh, for sure.
And when it came down to it, it wasn't even like, I mean, I'm still responsible for dealing with my problem, but I got caught. All of the lies and all of the things and the house of cards that I built that was amazing because it worked for years, that I tried to protect, all got blown down in one fell swoop.
Right. Well, because if you're anything like me, I think I didn't want to deal with the problem because the problem wasn't actually the alcoholism. The problem ultimately ended up being me. And so I knew that, but I didn't want to like take it that far to actually deal with that. Right.
And when I got into this, I had no clue what I was getting into. I just knew. I had no clue. No clue. It's like, okay, quit, put the bottle down. I got brutally honest from day one because I called work and I let them know. And I made an appointment with my doctor and I told my wife. And then the next 3 days after that, I called my parents. I talked to her parents. I talked to my sister. And I said, all of them, I had a problem. Absolutely brutal first week. But that set me up. It set me up amazingly for success because I there was so many people that I just didn't lie to anymore. And I was like, oh crap.
It's accountability.
Yeah.
Eating out is empowering as all hell. It's also dangerous for some people.
Yeah.
Oh, I always point that, my wife's a second grade teacher, right? And she's, like I said, she's a muggle. She doesn't have a problem. But if she was fighting this battle, it'd be really hard for her to tell everybody. I'm an old white male tenured professor who actually has a pretty good following in the college after all these years. Just, no one's going to judge them if they do. I don't give a frick, right? And I'm like, it's privilege is what it is, right? For me, right? And so I just right away. I mean, that's why the whole world knows, right? Because I'm just like whatever, and the advantage of that is people come to me, right? And we can have conversations.
Yeah.
When they're ready, right? But that not everybody, I'm really, really careful to remember that not everybody has that privilege to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And they need to find their own way. I have some friends that say, like, you got to come out to X number of people at least, right? And who will help you and talk to you, right? Because you cannot nail bite it yourself. It's just an so.
So talking about like Steve's talking about the different things he would tell himself that kept him like sabotaging, especially before I quit drinking. I was convinced that I was the only person who was like me, stay-at-home mom who looked like she had it all together and was secretly drinking 2 bottles of wine a night, or sometimes taking swigs off a whiskey bottle in the morning. And I was so sure I was the only one. So I couldn't talk to anybody, right? There was no way I could let anybody know how bad it was. And that was one of the stories that I told myself that kept me drinking for a really long time, because, God forbid anybody find out what a monster I was.
Mm.
And of course, as soon as I showed up into groups and recovery circles and stuff like that, I realized I wasn't alone at all. But it took then the vulnerability to say, hey, here's what's actually happening. This is how much I'm really drinking. This is what my life really looks like once you peel away, the perfect outer picture that I've created. This is what it actually looks like underneath. And then I got to realize I wasn't alone. I sat down and I don't very often prepare for these recordings very much. I'll write down a note or two, if that. But I actually sat down and wrote about self-sabotage because it's been really front of mind lately for me. So I started reading the book The Mountain Is You by Brianna Wiest, I think it's Wiest, which is a friend of mine. Recently, I told her I was reading that book, and she was like, I have never felt so seen and so called out at the same time. It's just that kind of book where you're like, oh, that hurts, but she's so right. And it's all about self-sabotage and all of the ways we do it and don't realize it. We don't know we're doing these things to ourselves until somebody calls it out and you're like, shit, that is exactly what I'm doing. And so I sat down and made a list of all the different ways that I still self-sabotage, because I think we do. Like, no matter how self-aware we are and no matter how much we try to live authentically and do the things that, we know are aligned with our values, we still do things where we're sabotaging ourselves. And the reason that's really important, none of my little self-sabotaging things that I do are going to make me drink right now. I'm nowhere close to drinking, right? But I know that if I stick with these things and I keep letting them make decisions for me, that I could end up going back there. That's a very real possibility. So, I still do things like I people please. And I really struggle with making decisions. I can't do it. I will avoid making a decision like the plague until I reach paralysis. Yeah, Steve's nodding. He's like, yes, that's what you do. And this is something I'm just realizing about myself. Even the smallest decisions, I just can't do it. And I think I settle for good enough, in so many different ways. I'm like, I'll tell myself I'm going to go do this thing. And I get most of the way there. And I'm like, yeah, good enough. That's fine. That's good. Over and over again. So I'm never getting any better at the things that I'm trying to do. So anyway, I have all these little things that I do that are just unhealthy, self-sabotaging behaviors. And what I realized was that they're all about avoiding feelings of being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Everything in my life that I do that isn't in alignment with who I am and who I want to be, it's all because I just want to avoid discomfort, that's why we drank, right? That was everything that I drank for, was to avoid the discomfort of hating myself and the discomfort of not feeling worthy and the discomfort of the pressure that I put on myself. And so I'm just realizing self-sabotage for me almost always is founded in I'm avoiding discomfort in some way. If I can figure out what discomfort I'm avoiding and then be like, okay, pull up your big girl panties and suck it up and go face the thing, you'll get through the discomfort and then it's better and then you're free. Just like at the very beginning when you guys were talking about we didn't want to admit that we had a problem. As soon as you face up, face the discomfort, be like, yes, that is me. This is where I'm at. You're free on the other side of it after you face the discomfort of it. And so I'm realizing that's kind of the answer to most of my self-sabotage, is just figuring out what it is that I'm trying to avoid, what discomfort it is, and then forcing myself to walk into it, even though I really, really, really don't want to.
Amen to that. I would even add on top of that, it's really important, I think, that we give ourselves grace when we self-sabotage, like we recognize these behaviors about ourselves. I used to beat myself up because I wasn't healing and changing as quickly as I wanted, right? Like I could somehow just pop a top off recovery and slam it like I was so used to doing before. Like, well, I know how to feel better real quick. Why do I got to do all this work, right? That whole neurotic pathway of thought. But I think this past year, especially being in, approaching my third year, is when it really starts to, the capacity for me to actually deep dive into some of this stuff is unfolding. And I've really been working on giving myself grace, because it's so easy to make a mistake and then I beat myself up for making the mistake. And so then I want to hide from that too. So then I just stop acknowledging when I'm making mistakes and I just completely isolate, so giving myself grace for making mistakes, giving myself grace for self-sabotage. You said it earlier. It's like nobody wakes up in the morning like, I'm going to self-sabotage today. Right. Yeah. It's a feeling like I'm just going to throw my life under the bus today. I wonder what I could screw up today. That's fun. No,
yeah. I'm triggered typically when I go to self-sabotage mode. It's something that set me off, that makes me feel like I'm not good enough, not worthy, not,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, these shares, these last couple of them here with Julie and Sean remind me of something that's probably obvious to you, but may not be obvious to everybody when they're in early sobriety, which is that, all right, two parts. One part is getting rid of not drinking, right? And that's ongoing. And then I was shocked, especially after a year, to realize the growth piece has only begun.
Yeah.
So people call it emotional sobriety, whatever words you want to use, but it's a real deal. I mean, listen to the two of you talk. We are continuing that growth, right?
Yeah.
And I always like to say, at first, it really pissed me off because I figured, okay, I should be done with it. That's right. And no, this is what it is. It's this continual growth, right? And the other thing I'll say is on the subject of shame, I'm a big fanboy of Brene Brown.
Yes.
Yeah. She's really, I read every word she's read, but yeah. Atlas of the Heart's my favorite coffee table book. So.
It is I absolutely love Atlas of the Heart. It's my favorite book.
Yeah.
It's like it was.
We quote that a lot around here.
So eye-opening.
And put a fork in shame, right? So.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So quick story, self-sabotage. Julie, you mentioned it. Rick, you mentioned it. Actually, I think we all have. Like, it's all something we still do, just not to the extreme that we did it for that subject, for that topic, for that thing. Because the self-sabotage can transfer to the same extreme from one thing to another if I don't figure out how to heal or be honest about what I'm avoiding.
Right.
What is the discomfort? What is that feeling? So I just started university. I went back to college. Week 1 is done. I've got my quizzes in, all the tests and stuff. I'm sitting at like hundreds and A's and stuff. This is not a thing Steve has ever in his school history. A's. Even for week 1, it's not a thing. Week 2 comes along and I stressed and I because university college, I did this 20 years ago. College is different now. Everything's digital. So I get into week 2 and I kind of have a little bit of a routine going on. I'm doing my survey of law class, survey of business law, and I'm Canadian, U.S. Constitution, First Amendment, Second Amendment, all of this stuff. And I'm reading this chapter and I'm pretty confident. I get the homework done. The homework's great because I can do the quizzes a bunch of times and it teaches me lessons. I get to the last quiz, the last homework. That one's timed. And I panic when I'm timed. And I got 20 minutes to answer 11 multiple choice questions. And so I'm going through them, and I'm pretty confident that I've got at least 8 out of those 10 right. and I got 12 minutes left, and I hit submit. 54.4% F.
Huh.
And I got smoked in the face by it. All internal shame. Smack. Oh, I'm not telling anyone about this. My next grade will be fine, and then I'll tell people the next good grades that I have. And what I do is I rob myself of the experience of someone showing up for me. There's the sabotage there. I rob myself of the experience of being honest with myself about some of the things that I could have done better. So I take away the opportunity to really try and fix it or ask for help or not. So it took me like 3 hours to find the courage to say, I got an F. And I know it's not like the detriment of the whole thing, but that was a really emotional experience for me, and it was really uncomfortable.
I'm really quick going to jump in and take that, and I'm going to tie it into something that I did early in sobriety. I know we're like running out of time here, but that reminds me so much of like, I would tell myself I was going to quit. And then when I was like a year sober, then I would tell people, right? So if I failed, nobody would know. But then when I finally had it figured out, then I would tell everybody and they could be happy for me, right? And you're talking about like, you weren't going to tell anybody about that grade because you'd get a good one and then you could talk about it, it'd be fine, right? That's exactly what I did in early sobriety. And I think I stayed stuck in that for like 3 years before I actually managed to get anything to start sticking. That was like my way of sabotaging myself. Well, don't let anybody, like, don't tell anybody, because then if you fail, they're going to know. And then that's shame, and we can't feel that. So I kind of did the same thing, but I did that with sobriety back in the years before I managed to quit.
And it's actually the community that helps you in sobriety and to stay sober. So it's the reaching out and admitting that you have a problem.
So that's exactly where I was going to basically tie it back into. It's the same thing that I did way at the beginning that said, you know, I did something that I'm not proud of. It's bad. But I am not inherently bad because of it.
Exactly right.
And it's still, even at 3.5 years, it's like it hit, but it's the same tools. It's the same community of people that I reached back out to say, hey, this is where I'm at. And the cool thing was, when you find the right community, I wasn't told how to fix it at all. I was just met right where I was at. All right, cool. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Like, really cool. What's going on? Like, you're doing well still. And then I talked about what I learned about it. So, I mean, it's still the same things that I did 3 years ago with people just sharing it.
And being honest is so cathartic, isn't it?
It is.
And yet we get in our head every time, like,
it.
I'm not going to be honest. And then we're honest, like, why don't I just do this all the time? Right. It feels great.
Absolutely.
I'm not well. Just what do you know? Little do I know, they already know. So, but I'm learning that they know already. So
That's the beauty of it all. In the end.
Absolutely.
Want to wrap this up, Julie?
Sure. That's generally your job.
That's generally my job. All right. I think we had an amazing conversation, Sean, Leah, and Chef Prof. Rick. This is an amazing conversation. We covered a lot of ground about self-sabotage in so many different ways. I'm not even going to list them off because they did. You guys really showed up and brought it tonight. And so I really hope that our listeners found something that they connect with in this conversation. And if you do need help, you can reach out to any of us. You can reach out to Sean.
absolutely.
Oxford House, the website there, or
All just to talk, happy to talk. Or
anyone here. Self-sabotage, Rick, you talked about it being a growth journey. That's all we're here for each other and to share a little bit of our journeys. So I want to say thank you, Sean. Thank you, Leah. And thank you, Chef, for sharing your experiences and your thoughts with us tonight. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you for the invitation to the space. It was very nice to meet the other two as well, Leah and Chef. I hope I see you again.
Nice to meet you too. And thank you for Through the Glass community. Wonderful space.
Absolutely. Thanks for being a part of it.
Yeah.
You are very valued. So we appreciate you guys. Thank you all so, so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Through the Glass Recovery Podcast. Don't forget to find us on Facebook and Instagram so we can keep in touch. We'll see you next week with an episode about transfer addictions and how to get those under control.